They were left with almost no equipment. The attacks by the Ukrainian Armed Forces have effectively destroyed the Russian military base in Sevastopol. Agents of the partisan movement TES, during reconnaissance of the 758th Logistics Support Center of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, discovered that there was almost no equipment left on the base, and the few vehicles remaining appeared to be non-operational.
What we're talking about is that from the Kherson direction, the Russian occupiers have redeployed units of the 7th Airborne Division to the Zaporizhzhia direction. Therefore, I do not completely rule out the distinct possibility that the apparent lack of equipment at this particular facility is in fact due to the so-called rotation or strategic redeployment of military personnel and accordingly their associated equipment directly to the active combat zone.
And also the security service of Ukraine carried out explosions on Russian railways. One of the operations took place on the Mala-Hangelsk-Glazunovka section. There, Russian railways employees found unidentified mines. During the demining process, an explosion occurred, resulting in the deaths of 2 National Guard officers and injuring another. Federal-level railway traffic was also halted.
Okay, so what we are looking at here is a complete list of all the individuals who have a requirement to travel to the following destinations: Belgorod, Ursk, and finally Ukonare.
Another explosion occurred in the Leningrad region on the St. Petersburg-Pskov Railway on the Strogonovo-Mshinskaya section. As a result of the sabotage, the locomotive derailed and 15 fuel tank cars were destroyed. But it's not just in the rear where the enemy is uneasy. At the front, the occupiers are also failing to meet the Kremlin's plans. The Ukrainian army is achieving successes in the Sumy region. At the same time, the Russians are suffering significant losses. In the Kharkiv region, reports Zelensky.
In the Sumy direction, Ukraine's defense forces have seized the operational initiative. This refers to advances directly toward the notional Russian-Ukrainian border and the deoccupation of additional settlements, Konstantinovka and Novokonstantinovka. In the Sumy direction, Ukraine's defense forces have thwarted not only the military but also the political plans of the Russian leadership to create a so-called buffer zone with an advanced depth of up to 20 kilometers.
Meanwhile, Russian forces continue to violate NATO airspace. The Russian drone detected in Romanian airspace on the night of September 13th was already the second such incident after Poland. As noted by the Institute for the Study of War, Russia is thus trying to analyze the capabilities and response of the North Atlantic Alliance to the incursion of strike drones in order to use these observations in future conflicts.
The Russian Federation is testing NATO's possible response not only in terms of airspace violations, but also in terms of improving JPR signals over a significant area. Strangely enough, this primarily concerns the Baltic countries, Poland, and accordingly the Scandinavian countries. In addition, free navigation in the Baltic Sea is under threat.
Meanwhile, the Polish foreign minister has proposed that the West intercept Russian drones and missiles in Ukrainian airspace.
This is a revision of Poland's position. Let me remind you, the Ukrainian side has been making proposals to close the airspace over western regions of Ukraine since the beginning of the large-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Accordingly, that large-scale provocation by the Russian Federation became a catalyst for the change in the position of the Polish political leadership regarding the neutralization of the aerodynamic weapons of the occupying country.
As reported by the New York Times, the production of strike and reconnaissance drones has become a priority for the Russian dictator. In just 2025, the occupiers have launched more than 30,000 UAVs, which is almost 9 times more than during the same period last year. Accordingly, the aggressor country has also increased its production of drones.
The comparison provides figures for the past year and accordingly for the number of drones specifically in 2025. Moreover, it is emphasized that up to 50% of these drones are decoy drones. These are Garand drones that do not carry a warhead. Therefore, there is currently no basis to talk about a large-scale increase in the production of strike drones specifically.
You are on the YouTube channel Ukraine Today, and I'm Vladimir Rapchun in the studio with you. Subscribe to our channel and like this video. It's easy and simple for you, and it makes us happy. The YouTube algorithm likes it and helps promote our content. The topics we will discuss over the next 20 minutes have already been announced. Not all of them, but most were mentioned in our segment. So all that's left is to introduce our guest who has joined us on air. Alexander Kovalenko, military and political observer from the Information Resistance Group. Alexander, glad to have you here.
Thank you. Good day to you.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start with something fresh, the very latest news. This unexpected appearance of representatives from the United States in Belarus is to monitor the progress of the joint Russian-Belarusian exercises, Zapad 2025. This information was published by Reuters. Reuters isn't exactly known for frequently publishing fake news, but sometimes things do slip through. So the question is this fake or is it actually true?
I don't know. I'm currently in Belarus, so I can't just verify the information.
Maybe you've come across this from other sources as well?
In general, as I understand it, there are certain agreements between Belarus and the United States on this matter, especially since we've repeatedly observed a very interesting phenomenon lately. Belarusian leader Lukashenko is trying very actively to sit on three chairs at once, so to speak. This essentially means, on the one hand, not breaking his important ties with the Russian Federation and to remain with Russia as a so-called union state, while on the other hand, also trying to find some measure of common ground with the countries of the European Union without provoking them to an excessive degree, and at the same time, maintaining fairly good and consistent contact with the White House. Well, since Donald Trump, in addition to having a certain weakness, as we can see for dictators and various types of autocratic regimes, also needs Lukashenko for another reason. Specifically, he needs him to showcase his successes in the matter of releasing political prisoners in order to increase his chances of receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Lukashenko has quite a lot of political prisoners. It's not just hundreds of people sitting in prisons, it's thousands. Every time, on one pretext or another, they release 40 or 50 people. Donald Trump boasts about this. Look at what I did, something Joe Biden didn't do during his entire term. Every time I have contact with Lukashenko and secure the release of political prisoners. In this way, he pins these achievements on himself like medals. And accordingly, Lukashenko agrees to meet with him on various occasions on different issues. That's why I don't rule out that, of course, American observers could have been present in some capacity. We see that their presence at these exercises was limited.
Well, yes, limited. Specifically 2 people. Supposedly, some general over there, Krynin, said they could inspect anything they wanted. Okay, we'll keep following the developments. Maybe more information will come out, or there will be denials or confirmations of these reports. Very interesting. Well, another topic, this one is also relatively recent. It's the pipe tactics of the Russian occupiers. It's not like this is the first time they've tried to get onto Ukrainian territory through gas pipelines, but this is yet another instance of it. How successful are they with this tactic? How skillfully and promptly does the Ukrainian side stop the occupiers somewhere along the gas route into Ukraine?
I wouldn't say they're successful, but it depends what is the actual goal here. Let's evaluate those scenarios involving the use of communications pipes which are known. For example, there's the Avdiivka operation in Avdiivka when a pipe was used to infiltrate our rear, and it was successful. Indeed, they managed to infiltrate our rear and thus put the garrison that was defending Avdiivka in the part that was still controlled at that time by the Ukrainian Defense Forces in, let's say, an uncomfortable position. Another operation is the Suja one, the pipe at Suja. And here I want to point out that it made absolutely no sense because at that time the Ukrainian Defense Forces were withdrawing from the Kursk region, including from Suja. And the battles that took place there were rearguard actions of the rearguard type. I honestly don't know what level of military amateurism one must possess not to clearly see that the enemy is actively fighting rearguard actions against you, and at the very same time is systematically and steadily withdrawing all of their forces from the territory. In this particular case, I am referring to General Alexander Lyman, who was the one responsible for issuing the direct command to commence Operation Potok, which is more commonly known as the pipe in the Russian town of Suja. And as is now widely and well known, for a grueling 15 kilometers through the confines of a narrow pipe while contending with numerous poisonings, a multitude of logistical problems, and even tragic fatalities. The Russian troops painstakingly crawled that entire distance and eventually emerged into the almost completely empty and deserted city of Suja. There was absolutely no point to it at all. They just needed PR, like we carried out a historic operation with no analogs in the world. PR for whom? Primarily for Lyman, since his failure in the Kursk region, even to the point where they had to bring in North Korean soldiers to fight there, was quite telling. And Lyman urgently needed to impress the command, to impress Putin, to create this information wave as if they had carried out some kind of unique operation. And after that, all this business with the pipes began. They started installing them near churches. Then Tsiganova even danced to a song about the pipe. Basically, it was an information campaign solely to somehow justify Lyman. Did it help him? No, it didn't help. He was removed from his position as commander of the Kursk group, not just the northern group of forces, which includes the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod groupings. But overall, all of this ended, of course, with heavy losses and for nothing. Although, by the way, there's a very interesting point about Lyman. When he was offered an airdrop into Sudzha using several groups of Mi-8 helicopters, supported by Mi-28 gunships flying at extremely low altitude for 15 kilometers, which is less than a 5-minute flight, and they could have actually used that. But Lapin didn't want to risk the helicopters, which could have been shot down. So he chose to have his soldiers crawl through the pipe for several days, with the result that some of them suffocated inside and others suffered lung burns that will never heal. The pipe currently in Kupiansk is a somewhat different story. There will be fewer fatalities there since this pipe has not been in operation for quite some time. If we're talking about the pipe to Sudzha, it was operational. And even when Sudzha came under the control of Ukraine's defense forces in 2024, that pipe was still functioning. And essentially, they were sending their troops into an area contaminated with hazardous chemicals and gases. The pipe that goes to Kupiansk has not been operational for quite a long time. Over a period of time, Russian troops had created holes, exits, and even rest areas there where they could rest after the long process of crawling along. It takes approximately 4 days to move through this entire pipe system in general, to eventually come out near Holubivka, specifically in the area of Holubivka, moving toward Kupiansk, inside the zone that they currently control. In part, this approach justifies itself by allowing them to transfer personnel without having to force the Oskil River and without coming under attack from our FPV drones and artillery. Yes, it takes a long time. Yes, this drags on for quite a while, but if they do it in a steady stream, one after another, they manage to get a constant influx of manpower on the right bank without serious losses. The only downside is that the troops are physically and psychologically exhausted, but who cares about that in the Russian command? And this manpower is immediately thrown into the outskirts of Kupiansk. So in this case, yes, the scenario is justified.
Okay, is Ukraine in control of the situation?
Yes, that is correct, taking into account the fact that this has become widely known. Both the high-level general staff and our own group that is directly controlling this specific area are fully aware of it. Furthermore, on a periodic basis, these designated zones do indeed come under direct fire. So as a direct consequence, whenever they attempt to come out, they almost immediately find themselves coming under that hostile fire. For now, logistics are still being carried out. Well, they are in relative safety. That's the only downside. I think the issue will be resolved after a proper clearing operation is conducted specifically in the Kondrashovka-Radkovka-Golubovka triangle. That is on the left side of the R79 highway, where their main exit zones are located. As soon as this area is cleared, the scenario with the pipeline will immediately become unworkable. Not just an idea, but it will either be destroyed, eliminated, mined, barricaded, and so on, to make sure this simply doesn't happen again.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, Russia is escalating. In particular, it is attacking Poland with drones. At least 19 of them flew into Polish territory or violated Polish airspace. The reaction is interesting, but rather soft, perhaps, uncertain, both from the Polish representatives themselves and from the international community or from NATO. If the reports are to be believed, out of 19 drones, 4 were shot down. That's Poland, yes, but there was also a drone in the sky over Romania, and that story is even more mysterious. Either mysterious or extremely cynical. When a Romanian F-16 almost shot down this drone, but the drone turned around and flew toward Ukraine, so they did not shoot it down after that. But really, why shoot it down if it can do something in Ukraine but not in Romania? Will these attacks escalate? And I'm not talking exclusively about a response from the North Atlantic Alliance or a response from Poland or Romania. No, will there be something else? Which of course is also very important, and I want to discuss that with you as well. However, will there be an escalation in the sense that Russia might allow itself to launch some missiles after the drones?
No, for now it won't launch any missiles. It's too early to talk about that. That's more of a medium or long-term prospect. For now, provocations will remain at the level of drones. Moreover, Russia has studied the reaction of Western countries to this provocation. As I understand it, they were completely satisfied with the reaction. Once again, they saw the spinelessness and amorphousness of the North Atlantic Alliance and the international community, their absolutely amorphous response. And they will continue. They will continue to provoke. After all, I want to point out, this is not only a test of the North Atlantic Alliance's reaction, it's also about conducting reconnaissance activities. During this flight, they studied which systems were used by the adversary, that is, by Poland for interception, what the air defense capabilities were. They studied the frequencies used for communication and which neighboring European countries not only supported them, and much, much more. A serious reconnaissance operation was also carried out. That's why I think we'll see a continuation of these provocations in the near future. That is, once again, incursions into Polish airspace. Of course, the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, are not excluded, and again, Romania and Moldova, as it borders Romania. In other words, they will try to put pressure on Romania through Moldova, including carrying out actions there. This is absolutely not out of the question, and such precedents have already taken place. But the most troubling thing for the NATO countries might be that these provocations in the airspace could escalate into provocations on land. They could also happen at sea, maritime provocations. That is the Baltic Sea again, the Baltic countries, Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden. In other words, Russia is now entering an active phase, I would even call it the hot phase of hybrid warfare. And after this phase, after the hot phase of hybrid warfare, there is only one clear, obvious phase left, an invasion of one kind or another. So all these countries that are now NATO members and border the Russian Federation are in the risk zone for land, maritime, if they have sea borders and air provocations. But after provocations, something bigger will follow.
And this means that NATO countries must somehow respond, or perhaps they've already missed this opportunity to react. Radosław Sikorski. Yes, my apologies.
No. Radosław Sikorski. What about Sikorski?
No, I mean Radosław Sikorski, the head of Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, stated that Poland should consider the possibility of at least intercepting Russian missiles and drones in Ukrainian airspace. As a member of the North Atlantic Alliance, as a member of the EU, it can do this, but it needs the support of the alliance, that is, other alliance members, in order to make this decision. And here the question arises, can such a decision be made in the foreseeable future now? Or is this just a loud statement, which is good that it was made, but is unlikely to lead to concrete actions?
Such a proposal was made by Volodymyr Zelensky back in 2022.
So that
NATO countries would help us establish a no-fly zone. Did they agree? No, they did not agree. Why? Because implementing such a scenario, such an approach, and carrying out such a proposal would mean integrating our air forces, the armed forces of Ukraine, and essentially all our layered air defense systems into the NATO air defense system. In other words, the air defense of a country that is not a NATO member would have to become part of the NATO country's air defense system, which no longer aligns with the statute of the North Atlantic Alliance. That is why the question is often raised that NATO is a bureaucratic, archaic mechanism that urgently needs reforms, but so far has not even started implementing them and does not intend to. These are vivid examples of just how bureaucratic and archaic this mechanism is, one that is outdated both morally and legally in every respect. In other words, NATO has no legal grounds to shoot down targets over Ukrainian territory in Ukraine's airspace, and for that, integration into their air defense system is necessary. Why is this integration needed? Because without synchronization between the systems, incidents of friendly fire can occur everywhere. And this is very dangerous. That's why integration is necessary. And again, for this very reason, it won't happen. Therefore, this proposal has already been voiced separately, and it has been like déjà vu many times, even back in 2022. That's why this sad déjà vu with a bitter aftertaste keeps happening. Will it be implemented? No, it won't.
Yes, we are following the developments. There will be many more to come. Thank you very much. Alexander Kovalenko, military political observer from the Information Resistance Group, joined our broadcast. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you.